everyone. 皆さんこんにちは. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Yoshi Domoto with the Japan America Society of Georgia. We really appreciate you joining us for our special webinar today on exploring Japanese company retention here in Georgia as part of our first and pilot series of the Japan America Society of Georgia and the Georgia-Japan Legislative Caucus webinar series. To get us started, I would like to introduce the chair of the Japan America Society of Georgia, Mr. Al Hodge. Mr. Hodge, よろしくお願いします。
Thank you, and welcome to everyone. We are celebrating the Japan America Society of Georgia's 40th anniversary this year. And with that, we are adding robust programs like these in order to make certain that we reach all of Georgia. And in fact, we've been very pleased with how many times folks from around the world have participated in our webinar series. This one is extra special because the Georgia-Japan Legislative Caucus is a very important part of our partnership and the Georgia team that works on economic development, investment, good jobs for Georgians, as well as working on good policies that work the other way. We are very proud of the number of Georgia companies that invest in Japan. Well, on behalf of Yoshi Domoto, our exec for the Japan America Society of Georgia, our chair-elect, Jessica Cork with YKK, a personally strong corporate leader, as well as YKK being a great corporate citizen, and of course our programs committee and our board of directors, we are very proud of what is going on in Georgia related to Japanese investment, our number one investor in our state. We, of course, can't do this without the team. And the team with Georgia Department of Economic Development and the great staff professionals here and in Japan. We are very proud of the fact that we have a number of chambers and other economic development organizations that participate in Japan America Society of Georgia. It is a team sport, and therefore state and our local communities and our electeds and professional staffs, like you will meet today with Melinda Linman, really help to make a difference for our state across the spectrum. Japan certainly has been in the news a lot, everything from being the first of the renegotiated trade agreements and the success that has resulted from that. We very recently have welcomed new Japanese companies to the state through attraction efforts. We also, of course, welcome the new Prime Minister, Prime Minister Suga. That's on the federal front in Japan. And I'm really happy that Warren Buffett has recently taken major stakes, has been a very solid investor in Japan in the last few weeks in particular, which shows great potential for Japan and for the United States and certainly Georgia. Well, if you were to take a look at the map of Georgia, you would see that there are Japanese companies throughout the state. You also would see that there are solid Georgia-based companies that do investments in Japan. Today's focus is retention, and if we take care of the folks that are already here, then opportunities for retention and expansion happen. And we certainly have a great, solid panel today representing JETRO, the Georgia Department of Economic Development, Bartow County. You'll hear the statistics and the hard work and the success that Bartow County has enjoyed over the last few years with our Japanese friends. The Japan-Georgia Legislative Caucus, represented by Daraka Sacher, all are ready to provide great information. Well, another major partner with and for our state is the Consulate General, and today we are very happy that the Deputy Consul General Fukunaga-san is going to be making some welcoming remarks, followed by Daraka Sacher. Meanwhile, we do want to call your attention that while today is retention and expansion, we are also scheduling an attraction program that will also talk about the policies, the procedures, the marketing, and the real opportunities to attract even more Japanese companies, investments, and good jobs to our state. Having said that, we welcome Deputy Consul General Fukunaga-san to add some welcoming remarks. Fukunaga-san.
Thank you so much, President host. Thank you for introducing me. I am Mamoru Fukunaga, Acting Consul General of Japan in Atlanta. First off, I would like to thank the Georgia-Japan Legislative Caucus and the Japan-America Society of Georgia for organizing this webinar. I am truly honored to have an opportunity to address on this occasion. I arrived in Georgia this April in the midst of this pandemic that dramatically changed the way of life for us. Even during this difficult time, I have received tremendous encouragement from the Japanese community and Georgians who are committed to our friendly relationship. It took little effort for me to realize how important and how strong the Japanese relationship is. Since the beginning of the major flow of Japanese investment in Georgia in the 1970s, our ties have only strengthened over time. The flip side of the eagerness of Japanese business is a favorable business environment created by the state of Georgia. Touted as the #1 state for doing business for many years, Georgia has provided multiple investment initiatives for foreign businesses, whether they are big global companies or small businesses. We can never forget about the legacy of those people who spearheaded these endeavors in forging a steadfast relationship between Japan and Georgia. During the time of going virtual in many aspects of our daily life, businesses are not at all virtual and they are making their best efforts to get over this challenging on the ground. What is especially encouraging is that many of the Japanese businesses have come forward to make much needed supplies, such as personal protection equipment and donations to local communities. I couldn't be more thankful for their tremendous contribution and commitment. Before concluding my remarks, I would like to touch a little on the recent development in Japan. As you may be aware, Japan has recently seen a change of government by the nomination of Mr. Yoshihide Suga as the 1990s Prime Minister of Japan last week. Before becoming a Prime Minister, he served the Abe administration as a Chief Cabinet Secretary for more than 7 years. He was the brainchild of many of the administration's economic revitalization initiatives, such as Abenomics. There is no doubt that Prime Minister Suga will advance pro-business policies and put Japan-US relationships in the center of our foreign relationships. Although it is true that the COVID-19 pandemic has slowed down the economy, Japan has been largely successful in containing the virus given the size of the population and the level of economic activities. I believe the new administration is making a head start for economic recovery and convening the Olympics and the pandemics next year as a testament to overcoming the pandemic. We are looking forward to welcoming our friends in Georgia to Japan in the near future. Before taking too long, I would like to hand over the program to Taraka and our panelists. Thank you again for me this opportunity, and I hope you all stay safe and to see each other in person in the not too distant future. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you Fukunaga-san, we really appreciate your participation here, and we welcome you to Georgia, and I know you've already done great work here, so we are very happy to have you. My name is Duraga Satcher. I work with Taylor English Decisions, a government affairs firm, but I'm also coordinator of the Georgia-Japan Legislative Caucus, which we started a couple of years ago now. And the purpose of that caucus is to basically help Georgia state legislators better engage with Japanese companies in particular in the state of Georgia, because as most of you all know, there's a great story to tell here, and the more support for that story and for getting that story out, the better off we all are. So you know, what we want to do with this session is really kind of, in a sense, kind of recruit all of you all who are participating now, because, you know, and a lot of you all are already involved in kind of telling this story, but Georgia certainly has a story to tell when it comes to the relationship with Japan and the economic relationship in particular. And the folks that we have participating on this panel have been involved in telling this story for a long time now. And certainly the Japan American Society has been as well. And so what we want to do is kind of equip other folks to help tell this story so that Georgia can basically raise his hand even higher when it comes to the economic relationship with Japan and enhancing that. So that's what we hope for everyone participating to kind of take away from this event. So we hope you enjoyed. We're going to hear from a lot of great people who have been basically in this fight, and I'll say fight kind of euphemistically, but I mean it is when it comes to really kind of getting us out there and really kind of showing what can be done. And it's real economic development and it's real jobs that we're talking about here. And so the folks who are on this panel have been involved in this fight for a while now in terms of telling this story, in terms of fighting for the jobs that are created as a result of it, and all the other kind of economic development principles that come along as well. So I'm going to try to keep my comments brief. I'm certainly going to ask questions of the panelists and ask questions that you all may have of the panelists. And by the way, if you do have questions, when you do have questions, you can go ahead and post them. And then at the end of this, we'll get to them. But I'm going to start with Takuya Takahashi, who is with the Japan External Trade Organization, which most of you all know is JETRO. He is going to basically give us a brief presentation, and then we're going to kind of start the panel with Melinda Lemon, who is also on. She's with the Cartersville Bartow County Department of Economic Development, and then and Joseph Hunteman, who is with the Georgia Department of Economic Development. I would go and spend time going into their bios. All these people are very impressive, but we have limited time here. You all can look them up. But I've had the pleasure of engaging with each of these folks, and I mean it's very impressive what they have done and their involvement and their engagement at a very high level. So, but we're going to start, as I said, with Takahashi-san, and then we'll go from there and continue the program. Takahashi-san.
Hi, arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you very much for having me today. My name is Takuya Takahashi. I'm a Chief Executive Director of JETRO Atlanta. First, let me talk a little bit about our organization, JETRO. JETRO stands for the Japan External Trade Organization. It is the official trade and investment promotion agency of Japanese government. JETRO has 49 domestic offices in Japan and 76 overseas offices in 55 countries, including 6 offices in the United States. I'm physically here in Georgia, covering 6 states in the Southeast. Currently, there are 4 pillars in our activities. First, assisting Japanese companies with their overseas businesses, including foreign direct investment abroad. Second, supporting export of Japanese products. And third, promoting foreign direct investment into Japan. And fourth, conducting surveys and research to contribute to the activities and trade policies of Japanese companies. Well, since today's topic is exploring Japanese company retention in Georgia, first I'd like to discuss foreign direct investment in the US by Japanese companies. Some of you may remember US-Japan trade friction in the 1980s. It encouraged Japanese companies to invest in the United States and start production. And Japanese companies have continued to invest proactively. Since then, Japanese investment in the US has increased steadily. Even during the financial crisis, this investment never stopped. So let me share my slides. From 2009, the year of financial crisis, to the 2019, the investment stock of Japanese companies has increased by more than 160%. I believe this is evidence of how their direct investment has taken root in the regional economy. Japanese companies now employ more than 860,000 people in the US. About 400,000 are in manufacturing, which is the largest among companies from foreign countries. Japanese companies have been contributing to the US exports as well. Approximately $87 billion of US exports are generated by Japanese companies in the US, which accounts for 6% of total US exports. It is the highest among all countries. Until recently, we have mainly seen manufacturers, particularly in the automotive industry, entering the Midwest. But in the last few years, they are increasingly choosing the Southeast and expanding here. Regarding the number of Japanese companies in Georgia, there are a few different figures depending on the data they use. When we use the data of affiliates with total assets, sales, or net income greater than $20 billion that have employment, the number of Japanese companies in Georgia is 218, the first place among foreign direct investors. In employment, Japan is second in Georgia, behind only the United Kingdom. Here in Georgia, Japanese companies are entering various fields. These are the examples of recent Japanese investment in Georgia. Other than these examples, there are some investment projects going on even during these difficult times of the pandemic. For example, Nippon Light Metal, a company specializing in aluminum products for the automotive industry, is building a new manufacturing facility with $50 million investment in Battle County, where Melita-san works. So it is clear that Japanese companies have established a solid presence here in Georgia. I think it may be very important for you who support Japanese companies to know the concerns they have and the challenges they face. So I'd like to address some of the challenges faced by Japanese companies in the period before and after the pandemic. Every year since 1981, JETRO has conducted a survey on business conditions for Japanese companies in the US. In the latest survey, which was conducted last November before the outbreak of COVID-19, we asked about the management challenges. I will share the top 5 factors leading to rising costs. Recruiting workers placed at the top again at 69% following last year's result. The highest answer was labor. The next highest answer was labor costs, and the third was retention of workers. But we can see that these top 3 factors are all related to workforce. And in the South, including Georgia, recruiting workers was the top response by far at 77%. Before the COVID-19, the US unemployment rate was at its lowest level in nearly 50 years. And for Japanese companies in the US, labor shortages were a prominent issue. Japanese companies expressed their concerns about, for example, about being unable to secure staff in all positions, or particularly struggling to secure engineers, or the image of the manufacturing industry declining overall, and the younger generation not finding it appealing, etc. Hiring conditions remain difficult regardless of industry type. And healthcare costs was the first place response. But this is partly because of the efforts Japanese companies are making with regard to workforce conditions. They tend to establish higher than average benefits such as healthcare. In the latest survey, we asked for the first time about the kind of benefits Japanese companies provide, and revealed that 96% of the respondents provide medical insurance, and 89% provide dental insurance. So we can see how important Japanese companies think their employees are. And getting back to the factors leading to rising costs, the fifth place was increasing tariff rate or trading restrictive measures. Some 40% of companies said they have been negatively affected by changes in the trade environment. The effect on their procurement and import costs have been especially significant. In terms of the responses, about 40% of companies experiencing these effects have changed a part of their procurement sources. But since it takes a certain amount of time and effort to change suppliers, they are not able to change all of their affected procurement sources. So this will be one of the biggest challenges for Japanese companies for years to come. And now I would like to talk about the issues for Japanese companies after COVID-19. Since the outbreak of COVID-19, JETRO US offices have conducted a series of quick business surveys 5 times so far to know how Japanese companies are reacting to this unprecedented crisis. Approximately 900 companies have responded each time, including about 70 companies in Georgia. Regarding post-COVID business outlook, the result of the survey shows that more than 60% of companies stated they will maintain their current business operation in the US for the remainder of 2020, while more than 20% are thinking of reducing operations. As for the business strategy in response to COVID-19, regarding business development, 30% stated they are working on developing new sales channels, products and services, while 20% will conduct exhibitions online and accelerate the use of AI and digital marketing. I think this is a signal of the acceleration of the digitalization in business operations. And now there is a very big issue rising right now. On June 24th, President Trump signed a proclamation suspending entry of aliens seeking entry to the United States pursuant to any of those non-immigrant visas, which are H-1B, H-2B, J-1, and L-1 until the end of December 2020. The business of more than 35% of Japanese companies would be affected, more than 10%, affected, and more than 10% stated that this would have a severe impact on their businesses. And this measure will delay personal changes. This delay of transferring researchers and engineering, there is concern that this may interfere with production and development. Across the US, at least 308 companies are more than 400 employees will be impacted. And looking at the breakdown of these numbers by state, 24 companies and 120 employees will be impacted in Georgia. Well, those are the recent challenges Japanese companies are facing in this current environment. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Takahashi-san. Really appreciate that. And it's a lot of great information. I'm sure everybody took it in. I want to get started and dive right into this. I want to take 1 minute of personal privilege here. And I wanted to make sure that I thanked Masa Akura, who is on the board of Georgia American Society of Georgia, Japan American Society of Georgia, only because he really was my introduction to this community. So I just wanted to make sure. I'm not sure she's watching right now, but I want to make sure I thanked her. But let's dive into this. And what I want to do is, Joseph, I want to start with you because we want to get an idea of, you know, kind of how this process goes in Georgia, starting kind of at the state level. And then obviously we'll go to Melinda to kind of talk about kind of how this process works on the local level with retention. But Joseph, we want to start with you and ask about particularly kind of what attributes in particular does the state and the department focus on when engaging Japanese companies?
Thank you, Doraka. And I'd like to sort of preface my comments here by saying that every company really is looking for the same things when they're looking at a place to do business. They're looking for a stable business environment, a quality skilled workforce, well-built and well-developed infrastructure, and cooperation from the community and the people surrounding them. That doesn't change whether you're working with a Japanese business, an American business, German, UK, Chinese, you name it. They're all looking for the same thing. So in terms of anything that we would focus on with Japanese companies in particular, these are just sort of points on a spectrum, I guess. Maybe put a little more emphasis on this versus what we may put on emphasis on with an American company or a company from some other nation. But I can say that Georgia's culture and Georgia's economic development efforts mesh very well with Japanese business culture, particularly because Japan places such an emphasis on relationships, relationship building, and long-term success. And that's because for Georgia, economic development really is a team effort. We work at the state level, the local level. We have private partners. We have utility companies we work with. We work with other state agencies, the Department of Transportation, Department of Labor, the technical college system. It's a unified approach to economic development. And when Japanese companies see how we bring in so many resources from so many different angles, that really puts us ahead in their estimation, because they can see that no matter what their problem happens to be, whatever the current issue happens to be, that over the long term, they're going to have partners who will be able to see them through any issues they may have. So to that end, of course, we do have Melinda here as a panelist, right? Who's one of our local partners. We also have state partners in the legislature here with the caucus in the audience. And we also have our private partners, the utility companies, Georgia Power, the Electric Cities of Georgia, Georgia EMC. They all assist in various roles. And on top of this, we make sure to maintain channels of communication both here at the state level with myself, but not only myself, particularly in the case of retention. We have 12 existing industry recruitment professionals who are scattered across the state. They all live and work in the communities that they serve. So they're visiting companies day to day, checking up with them, right? And we also have overseas offices. We've had representation in Tokyo for over 45 years. And our current office director, Ms. Yumiko Nakazono, has an extensive network. She's not only working to recruit companies, I believe in a future panel discussion, she's going to talk about how she does that, but she's also daily keeping up with our existing Japanese industries because we have so many in the state. So that gives you a picture of everything we bring to bear when we're working with Japanese companies. Now, getting to your specific question about what to pay particular attention to when you're working with Japanese companies, when you're having these conversations, there's not a lot of difference in terms of recruitment versus retention. The emphasis is always on building and maintaining that relationship. The emphasis is always on listening carefully to the needs that are being conveyed by the company. Because the Japanese, the method of communication, the mode of communication can be a little different from what Americans are used to. In American business, things can often be very transactional, right? They may say, well, if you can do this for us, then we can do this. A Japanese company representative is not likely to put a statement out there like that. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but in discussion meetings, they may come to us and say, well, we're having a few issues with recruitment, or we're having a few issues with some utility service, and they're not necessarily going to say, well, we want your help. We need you to bring in a larger water and sewer line. They're not going to say, we need you to help us find XYZ staff. But they'll sort of talk around the subject, and it's oftentimes up to us, either at the state or local level, to pick up on what the problems are that they're really trying to get at. So being attentive is critically important when dealing with Japanese companies. I would argue more so, perhaps, at least in terms of paying close attention to what's being said than with other companies. Don't always count on them to propose a solution or, again, say, if you can do this for us, then we can succeed. It's oftentimes the onus is on the community side or the state side to propose solutions. And sometimes it may take several options put in front of a company to hit on the specific item that they're really looking at. So it takes a lot of patience. It's not a process that can be accomplished with a couple quick emails. Verbal communication and body language are very important. That's one of the reasons I would argue that the current pandemic environment has been especially tough in working with Japanese companies. They're all doing well. You saw from Takahashi-san's presentation that the vast majority are planning to either maintain or possibly expand operations. But sometimes it takes a little more effort to tease out what the issues are and what really can be done to help them not just get through, but to thrive over the long term.
Yeah.
And checking in with them on a regular basis, making sure even if they're not coming to you with problems, that you're maintaining constant communication. Because sometimes it's maybe a matter of saving face. Sometimes it's a matter of simply not having the time or resources to devote. But for a lot of reasons, Japanese companies tend to be a bit reticent when it comes to bringing problems to third parties.
Yeah, and I'll say, and Joseph knows what he's talking about when it comes to the importance of communication. I think he had already told me this before, but I relearned that he's basically fluent in Japanese. And so for those who know, that's always important, obviously, for those who do take the time to, and I'm saying this is only an English speaker, when it comes to international relations, for those who do take the time to learn the language and the culture in particular. So he knows what he speaks of. Al, did you want to make a quick point before I?
Very quickly, I do want to commend Joseph Hunteman and his team at the Georgia Department of Economic Development. The state of Georgia, because of good business policy, so thank you legislators, thank you Governor Kemp, is year in and year out the #1 state in the nation for doing business. And Joseph here and his team at the department, and Yumiko and her team in Japan, there's a reason why they're number one. So thank you, and please keep that up. Thanks, Dorako.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's very important to kind of, when we have these conversations, to connect them to kind of, you know, real life and real world. And we, you know, we're talking about jobs, we're talking about Georgians working and being employed. And so I'm saying that because I know legislators are on this on this part of this event. So, you know, this isn't just kind of, you know, vague conversations we're having here. This directly affects Georgians in the state, and then obviously, you know, Japanese as well, and working together. So very important. So speaking of that, and speaking of the importance of jobs, I'm going to kick it over to Melinda, who is I'm sorry, I'll say, yeah, Melinda, who's on the ground when it comes to job creation and economic development in a big way. And so I'm going to let her talk about that. So Melinda, you can start kind of, you know, hitting on the points that you want to hit on, and talk a little bit about what you do at Cartersville Bartow. But then I want you to also, you know, after that, just tell us more about specifically how you engage with the companies that are already in your community.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity. Our community, in a lot of ways, is not different than most other Georgia communities. For a long time before me, excuse me, energy saving lights. So I was afraid that was going to happen. For a long time, our community has benefited from the investment that Georgia has made in the international office in Japan, in stellar staff in the Atlanta office who speak the language and understand the culture. They've been able to teach me over the years, and other economic development practitioners like me. So with that, when I came to Bartow County, there were already quite a few Japanese companies here, and I'm glad to say we've been able to grow that. All the investment and the sweat equity of a lot of leaders from years ago, and then the 16 years that I've been here, have resulted in the retention and attraction of companies like Yanmar, Sakai, Daiaki, Komatsu's International Training Center, Airman USA. I'm afraid I'm going to forget somebody. Airman, certainly Toyo Tire, and then our newest Japanese company, Nippon Light Metal. So collectively, those companies, not even including Nippon Light Metal, have employed 2,370 individuals from Bartow County in our labor draw area. They have invested $2.3 billion in new capital investment just in the time frame that I've been here. This is a graphic that we did as a big thank you to those companies, and I'm glad to say that this portion of our international portfolio continues to grow and thrive. We have about 170 some odd manufacturers. Most of those are small to medium companies. Of those, 37 are international and 8 are Japanese. So that is the largest international contingency that we have. So it's very important to us. There's some strategies that we use to retain those and attract new ones. Just a few thoughts that I've put together regarding the retention piece. As Joseph said, you know, what makes certain companies successful is not necessarily contingent upon where they come from in the globe or if they're homegrown. They all need someone to listen to them, to try to understand their needs. We need to listen to the direct needs. We need to anticipate other needs that they haven't asked for yet, but knowing our communities, we might be able to help navigate them through a tricky situation. We don't want surprises. In my experience, surprises are not necessarily a good thing. So no surprise policy in this community. That liaison support for the community to invest in an economic development professional, chamber of commerce type person that can be a liaison is critical. And that person can help connect them with a number of resources. For Japanese companies, any company to be successful, workforce pipeline, low cost of doing business, and good transportation network are 3 of the key things that I have written down, and Joseph already mentioned that. These are areas that you all as legislators invest in heavily. It's paying off for communities like ours. So I want to say thank you. And so that not only helps your broad Georgia constituency, but certainly helps this conversation with our internationals. The regular communication is important. What we do, we try not to waste their time with inundating them with emails that are not going to be important. We focus on cost savings measures, reminders about certain forms, like to file their Freeport exemption forms by a certain date, the any statutory discretionary support that's built in. There's certain times a year that that we need to call on them to remind them of these savings, but we also just check in on them from time to time. Honestly, conversations with them about what the state is doing in support of COVID recovery, the Northwest Georgia, the inland port in the Appalachian Regional Port in our part of the state, and certainly Gainesville, that's an important investment of the state that's paying off here. I will say that engaging our local companies, any local companies in education partnerships, particularly the college and career academies, has really been fruitful. It's important to the companies, but it's paid off for our education system as well. We have a little anecdotal example where one of our companies really needed some more engineers. And so we found a short-term solution, but as part of a long-term solution, they were willing and able to connect with our post-secondary education partners and the college and career academy. They introduced a mechatronics program at the College and Career Academy because there was enough economy of scale. So that, with some heavy engineering emphasis, I think is going to be a great long-term workforce pipeline solution for that engineering need. So specific to international companies, some things to be sensitive to is that the exchange rates, tariffs, or trade, I'll say, opportunities may come into play in the strategy on how the locals in the state can help a company. It may be a threat. So keep that in mind. Sometimes bringing in, we have an example of a proprietary piece of equipment that had to be imported from Japan. It was expensive already, but the exchange rate just really put the costs through the roof, and that was a difficult situation for the company. And we were able to work with them on the bonding capacity for their bonds for title program to, incorporate that that challenge, the extra expense. It drove the cost of the asset up, which in turn ultimately impacted our tax base positively too. But in being a partner, it helped present a solution. Engaging in the community. I'll say we have some fun with this. We have a fabulous Western Art Museum in Cartersville that many of you may know, and maybe it's a little cliche, but this whole East meets West things is just theme is just really interesting. The cowboy mentality just provides a nice Smithsonian level backdrop venue, if you will, for our highest elected officials, our community leaders, to meet with the highest ranking officials from companies that come in. So it's important to be able to host a meeting or get these visiting dignitaries together. And when they get together, you all are typically part of that, but celebrate the foods that are different, the music, the culture that's different. But you can also talk about the commonalities. We all value the arts and culture. So it's a little bit of an icebreaker. We have similar climates, natural beauty, the world-class Olympic cities that we have in common, direct flights, all those things that you hear about. If you have the opportunity to travel to Japan, you're going to see Coca-Cola and Aflac and UPS all over Japan. It's really amazing. And just to wrap up a few thoughts on the workforce part, for the locals to connect with workforce, it's been kind of interesting to me if the HR team from a Japanese company is not from the South, they may not appreciate things like Sundays in the South. It's probably worthwhile to consider churchgoers in your schedules. right? Your shift work to encourage good attendance and that sort of thing. It's a little bit of different culture here. And then honestly, something as simple as translating your business card is an amazing investment. It shows that you've made some effort, but English on one side, Japanese on the other. It's a great tool for you all as legislators to have. And that's probably one of the best communication tools. I'll give you my word of caution as I've tried to learn the Japanese language. I will never be like Joseph, but I had a situation where I tried so hard to learn conversational Japanese, and I was going to impress some colleagues, some friends, as my first time to the train station in Tokyo. And let's just say I was met with a gasp and a hand over the mouth and a ladies don't say that kind of thing. So I have stopped trying to to speak Japanese. I've got a few standard phrases about good morning, good afternoon. But I will say in the South, we use a lot of phrases like piece of cake. No, to emphasize, no worries, it's no problem. But I find myself saying piece of cake, and that doesn't translate well either. So maybe those are helpful tips on how we on the local level rely heavily on the state partners. We work with our local companies, and it's really provided some good long-term partnerships for our community and many others like us.
Yeah, Melinda. So I like that that dynamic you talked about with the East, the West, and the Western Art Museum. So for those of you all who didn't think about something when she said that, then you get points deducted. And what you should have thought about is the Magnificent Seven and that dynamic. Why? Because the Magnificent Seven is based on what? The Japanese film Seven Samurai. So that connection is there. You're just highlighting it. So that's good job. And I gave you that. I want credit for that if you mention it later. So
Okay.
thank you. So we, if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the box. We're going to keep going. If any questions pop up, I'll make sure that I ask them of our panelists. But speaking of that, Takahashi-san, I want to come back to you and just kind of get your perspective, from just you as a professional on retention strategies and policies to consider when working with Japanese companies. I mean, I know, your organization kind of focuses on the other way, but I would love just to kind of get your perspective and your kind of thought process when it comes to that.
Yeah, thank you. Not exactly the retention strategies, but personally, I think it's important to understand the characteristics of the way Japanese people and Japanese companies communicate. As Joseph-san and Melinda-san mentioned, how difficult and how important to understand what the Japanese people think. And so I'd like to introduce a booklet published by Jetro. This one. It's communicating with Japanese in business. Though it was published about 20 years ago, I still find it useful and interesting. It was written by an American intellectual specialist, Dr. Ernest Gundling, and contains tips to avoid a misunderstanding caused by different communication styles. If you have worked with Japanese companies, you might have questions. For example, such as why does it take so long to get a decision, or why do the Japanese need such detailed information, or what was that meeting about, etc. This booklet, for example, This booklet answers these questions, explaining interesting characteristic of the Japanese people. So I was surprised to know that JASG still keeps 2 copies of this booklet because we don't have any at our office. Now you can download it from our website. Thank you.
Oh, that's great. Great. Yeah, so that's so you can go to Jetro's website and download it. Okay, that's great to know. I hope everybody takes note of that. Something else that I kind of want to highlight, and I have a question coming to you, Joseph. But you know, a lot of this story that we're talking about here, and we have Melinda here for a reason, because a lot of folks don't really understand kind of what's going on in Cartersville and Bartow and the importance of that and what a great job she's doing. But I think it's important to know that, kind of a lot of this story is not just, even though Cartersville Bartow is pretty close to Metro Atlanta, a lot of the story is not about Metro Atlanta. I mean, it's amazing to see the companies in very rural areas in Georgia that are doing great things. It really is when you kind of go out into the middle of nowhere and see a thriving Japanese company there doing a lot of great work. And so that's something that we need to increasingly highlight. And I know it has been done, but I think for those who don't know, they automatically think a lot of this activity is just Metro Atlanta, when that's just not the case. And Jessica knows that very well. We'll hear from her soon. But on that note, Joseph, I just want to kind of ask you about how the department kind of stays kind of engaged in helping with this retention strategies, and particularly when you have companies that are kind of far away from you all geographically. Just talk a little bit about kind of how you all kind of make sure at the state level that things are kind of going well and that folks are staying happy with this economic relationship.
Sure. Well, I mean, at the department, of course, the first thing we can do is keep in touch with folks like Melinda, right? Because it's really the locals who are out on the front lines, keeping in touch with these companies on a day-to-day basis, hearing from them everything they're going through, whether it's negative, positive, other, and really from our side, ensuring that we stay in constant communication with our local partners, that we're up to date. Obviously, that was much more easily accomplished before we were all sent to work from home long-term, but we all have found ways to stay in touch, right? Through events like this, through online meetings, through traditional telecom. So really being informed is the first step, and staying up to date. To that end, right after our local community partners are our existing industry project managers, those 12 full-time regional project managers that work in my department, who are out in the state visiting companies. Well, maybe not physically these days, but definitely keeping in touch with their local industries. But we work it from the other end too. We have our office in Tokyo that we've had for 45 years and more now. So we are in constant communication with Yumiko Nakazono, our director over there. She provides us regular updates on the companies she's talking with. And oftentimes they will come to her with something that the locals are not necessarily aware of, which gives us an advantage, because then we can connect the discussion that's going on in Japan with what we're hearing on the ground in the communities, and really get at the roots of any difficulties or issues that companies may be facing, to ensure that if there is going to be some sort of an impact, that it will be minimal. So it's really, again, just hitting the basics, listening to concerns, making sure you're on top of what is going on, and preparing partners and strategies to ensure that before anything reaches a critical point, that we're reaching out to them and saying, we understand you're facing difficulties, and here's what we can do to help.
Yeah, great. No, that's great. Yeah, that's what this is all about at the end of the day. So absolutely. So we have a question here from the great Trevor Williams, who I think we all know. And Trevor's a friend, which is why I'm pretty sure he would put in a word in this question that he probably knew I could not pronounce, but I'm gonna ask it, and then I don't want to put anybody on the spot. So whoever kind of want to take it on, please do. But Trevor asks, and as you all see, Japanese companies are very committed to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Is it Kaidenren? The main industry chairman? Yeah, that is heavily focused on those UN Sustainable Development Goals. Do you think communities can stand out by showing an interest or knowledge about this? So, Joseph, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I'll start because I can say, first of all, absolutely that Japanese companies are very committed to sustainability. The Keidanren, that is an economic organization, sort of a club, a private industry club of sorts in Japan. And it's always in the background. I'm not going to go too deeply into Japanese culture and how nature has a profound impact on the way Japanese think too much, but just understand that any considerations a community makes toward those sorts of goals or toward sustainability or protecting the environment, that will be received well by, I can just pretty much assure you, any Japanese companies you work with. I will highlight another community here, Griffin in Spalding County. A few years ago, they embarked on a project to develop a new industrial park. And as part of the industrial park's design, they focused on sustainability goals, both in the design and engineering of the park itself, as well as the requirements and covenants and incentives for companies looking to locate down there. And as a result, they've had to date 5 Japanese companies locate in that industrial park. I'm not saying that the sustainability focus was directly responsible for that, but what I will say is that if that is a factor in your considerations, or if that's something you pay attention to in working with Japanese companies, you will see positive results.
Interesting. Yeah, Melinda, do you want to speak to that and kind of sustainability goals and the importance of that to the companies and parts of?
I don't have a lot to add, but I'll make a couple of points that has reminded me of. Don't underestimate the value of your existing industries. Nippon Light Metals actually has a great relationship with one of our existing companies, Vista Metals. Vista they utilize recycled aluminum and these specialty aluminum alloys to create very lightweight, strong metals for the aerospace industry and the automotive industry. So that recycling metal component and the fact that it's an incredible supplier really helped bring Nippon Light Metals to our community. So it maybe speaks to that point. And then the other one I wanted to make, the value of local sourcing for suppliers is really be huge.
Great. Yeah, that absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. So we're coming close to 2:30 here. So I wanna kick it over to Jessica Cork, who most of you all know Jessica, but she's with YKK. One of the longest relationships, economic relationships, business relationships between Georgia and Japan. So YKK obviously has been very important to this whole conversation that we're having. And also, like I said, even though Jessica at YKK, I guess the main headquarters is here in Atlanta, facilities in Dublin. And so it's that whole kind of conversation about, the rural and metro Atlanta. I mean, you are kind of emblematic of that. So anyway, Jessica, like I said, needs no introduction, but I wanted to turn it over to you to kind of close this out.
All right, thank you so much, Derek. Yes, YKK was one of the first Japanese companies here in Georgia. We had our first office in Atlanta in 1970, and just wanted to echo all of the comments that were made today from the perspective of a Japanese company that has been here for a long time. YKK, when we were first looking at locations, we looked throughout the Southeast. We were not initially focused right on Georgia, but it was absolutely because of the incredible support that we received from state and local officials, all the way from Governor Jimmy Carter to the working very closely with the state government, and then the city of Macon absolutely rolled out the red carpet for us and has been a tremendous partner now for more than 40 years. And I think we got some really great insights today. It's first of all that, you know, Georgia just has such an incredible story to tell, very long-term relationship with Japan. And, you know, it's the fact that it's the #1 state for doing business. If you are a Japanese company doing business here, you can absolutely see why that's the case. I loved all of the comments that were made about the importance of communication. I think I heard the word communication mentioned more than any other word throughout this discussion. So absolutely important. That's something that the Japanese companies value very much appreciate getting that constant communication from their local partners and then from the state as well. Just personally, please go and download that Communicating with Japanese in Business document that Takashi-san posted. I have had that document for the past, I think since it was published, maybe more than 20 years. That is more than any other book, any other document I've ever read. That is really great information for learning how to communicate better with Japanese executives. So please download that. And I'd like to go ahead and thank all of our panelists. Thank you so much, Deputy Consul General Fukunaga-san, and of course, Joseph from the Georgia Department of Economic Development, Melinda from Bartow County, Takashi-san from JETRO, and of course, Doraka for being such a great partner and pulling all of us together here. I wish it could be in person in one room, but since that's not possible, it's great to have this virtual venue to do that. And I would also, on behalf of the Japan American Society of Georgia, like to thank also the Japanese Chamber of Commerce of Georgia, who has been a great supporter of all of our programming as well. And would like to give a mention also to the great Japan-related educational institutions that we have in the state of Georgia that are supporting Japanese companies here and the children of Japanese expatriates. And that includes the Japanese Saturday School that is sponsored by the Japanese Chamber of Commerce of Georgia, and also International Charter Academy of Georgia, which is a bilingual immersion charter school in Peachtree Corners. And that is those two organizations are another great way of supporting Japanese companies here in Georgia. I'd also like to let you know that the finale weekend of Japan Fest is this weekend. Normally we'd all be gathering up in Gwinnett County, more than 25,000 people gathering together for Japan Fest. Can't do it in person this year, but it is virtual. You can go to japanfest.org free of charge to enjoy all of that great content. So please check that out. And as was mentioned at the beginning of the program, we are planning future programs on attracting Japanese companies as well. So please take a look at the Japan American Society of Georgia's website for information about that. Thank you all, everyone, for joining us today.